radio and the voice of Compton native Kendrick Lamar rapping, "We gonna be all right," to engage in a more fluid conversation, and, it appeared, to seek a response from me about his spiritual direction. "That's wonderful," I responded to one who was likely no more than 23 or 24 years old, trying to balance my concern for the challenges his new religious affiliation would present with the answer that I thought he wanted to hear, and perhaps expected, from a Muslim American scholar and activist whose name and work he recognized. As he drove, we discussed the political challenges posed by the Trump administration, and specifically the policies that would directly or disproportionately target Muslim and Latinx communities. Indeed, Trump capitalized heavily on demonizing these vulnerable groups, as evidenced most clearly by the two proposals, the Muslim ban and the Mexico wall, that became the rallying cries of his campaign. We also discussed how our kindred struggles with poverty complicated our pursuit of education, and how Trump's economic vision exacerbated conditions for indigent Americans, including the 45% of Muslim Americans living below, at, or dangerously close to the federal poverty line. The city's infamous slow-moving traffic enabled a fast-paced conversation between my new friend and me, and gave rise to an L.A. story seldom featured in newspapers or on television. Juan's responses focused on his everyday struggles living in L.A., and the stories of family and friends from his Pico Union neighborhood. He pointed out that the onslaughts on Muslims and Latinx communities were hardly separate and independent, or parallel and segregated. Rather, they were, and are, overlapping, intersecting, and, for him, very intimate. As an undocumented Latino from El Salvador living in Pico Union, a heavily concentrated Latinx community on the margins of downtown Los Angeles, I am most fearful about the pop-up checkpoints and the immigration rates, he told me. These fears were more than imminent under the administration of President Obama, dubbed the deporter-in-chief by critics who opposed the accelerated mass deportations carried out during the final stages of his second term. But without question, Juan's fears have become more visceral, more palpable, during the Trump administration. I think about this every time I drive to school, work, or visit a family member, Juan recounted, reminding me of the debilitating fear that comes over me after any terrorist attack. Yet his fear was far more immediate and frequent than mine, and loomed over him at every moment, including this one, while he and I weaved through Los Angeles traffic, talking animatedly about politics, faith, and fear. He could be stopped at any time, whether alone or while whizzing customers through the city he knew better than the lifelines on his palms. I thought about the very imminent dangers these xenophobic policies and programs posed for Juan and people in similar situations in Los Angeles and throughout the country. I knew this city well and understood that the armed and irrational fear directed at non-white, non-Christian people was intense in L.A., descending, among other places, on the city's galaxy of dense and large Latinx neighborhoods. This armed xenophobia was aimed particularly at those communities gripped by poverty, where Spanish was spoken primarily, and was concentrated on people and family lacking legal documentation, indeed the very intersection where Juan began and ended each day, and lived most of his hours in between. Years before I rode with Juan, Los Angeles was my home away from my hometown of Detroit, the city where I began my career as a law professor, earned my law degree, and only 2 weeks into my first year of law school at UCLA, the setting from which I witnessed the 9/11 terror attacks. I remember the events of that day more clearly than I do any other day, largely because every terror attack that unfolds in the United States or abroad compels me to revisit the motions and emotions of that day. For Muslim Americans, 9/11 is not just a day that will live in infamy or an unprecedented tragedy buried in the past. It is a stalking reminder that the safeguards of citizenship are tenuous, and the prospect of suspicion and the presumption of guilt are immediate. My phone kept ringing that morning, interrupting my attempt to sleep in after a long night of studying.